Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Yarns with Andy. Today I've got Raveen Jaduram, who's the ex-CEO of Watercare and currently the director of AT. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for your time, Raveen.
Thank you for the opportunity, Andy.
Yeah, appreciate
it's a pleasure. Yeah.
So you've had a long journey from Fiji to being the CEO of Watercare. Talk us through that journey as to why the water industry and what that journey means transitioning all the way from Fiji and come to New Zealand into the water sector as one of its key leaders.
That's a very good question. Never thought about it.
No.
I think it's one of those journeys that you don't know what the destination is.
Right.
So you take the journey, things happen in your life. So I studied in New Zealand. I went back to Fiji. And I was going to stay in Fiji. I love Fiji.
Yeah,
you know?
who doesn't?
Yeah, exactly. And then there was a military coup.
Yeah,
and,
right. Was this in 2013? Give or take?
2000, no. Before then.
Before
the first
then, yeah.
military coup.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah. So that's such a long time ago that, you know. So when that happened, 2007, I think. No, 1997.
97, yeah, right.
97. Yeah. And so that led me back to New Zealand. And then when I got back to New Zealand, I said, I better do masters. And you start looking at employment. And I was with council. And I went to the ARA, the Auckland Regional Authority, Auckland Regional Council. I was with drainage.
Yep.
You know, doing sewers and stormwater. And then joined Watercare. It came out of the Auckland Regional Council. And there was a drought.
Right.
And the opportunity was to get into the water supply side, which wasn't my background. It was more on drainage. But there was a lesson there, that do something that you haven't done before rather than continue doing what you're good at.
So because if you keep doing the same thing you're doing, you get the same result.
Exactly, and there's it's more exciting. So one thing led to the other. I guess my interest in management came out of the fact that I did not like working for people who did not look after their people.
Yeah.
And so the answer to that was, well, become the manager, because otherwise you're going to be the person working for shitty managers, right?
Yep.
And then that led me into what is called culture and behaviors and motivation and engagement. And that just told me that to change an organization means you've got to be at the head, which means you've got to aspire to get to being the general manager or one of the executives or being the chief executive, you know. So I guess the journey it didn't start with me saying, I want to be a chief executive one day.
Right.
I was very happy being a design engineer, you know, designing things and building things. But circumstances led me into what is very similar as an engineer. We're still designing, but we're dealing with people.
100%.
So we're designing systems and purpose. And we are growing people and strengthening people rather than strengthening buildings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you said, you didn't want to work for shitty managers.
Yeah. I still don't.
You still don't. Fair enough. From your perspective, define a shitty manager.
There's lots of attributes that they may have, one or more, but it could be their ethics, the values that they have. The most common one is that they're controlling.
Yeah.
They want to tell you what to do. They constrain your innovative juices that's flowing. They constrain your contribution that you want to make. They constrain everything. They're constraining. So they turn us into people who just turn up to do the task, wait to be given the next task, and then go home. For me, that's very boring.
Fair. I've had a manager like that.
I think we've all had managers like that. And some people thrive in that because their life becomes simple.
Yeah, because then they're performers. Then all they do is they have a checklist and that's tick off the checklist. They want to go home, which is great for them, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And then there are innovators who thrive on innovating. And it does depend on everybody's personality and what brings them joy at the end of the day as well.
Yeah. So they're leaders and they're followers. You can't be a leader if there's no followers, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, can we talk a little bit about your journey as being the CEO of Watercare? How's that experience been for you?
Well, I was CEO for 6 years.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed all my CE roles.
yeah,
So I had three. My first CEO role was Manukau Water,
yeah.
and then I was Chief Executive and Managing Director in Australia for an irrigation company. And that's the one I enjoyed the most.
Right.
And then, of course, I was with Watercare.
Yeah,
And that journey was exciting because I replaced Mark Ford,
yeah,
who had been running Watercare for 22 years. So he had created a culture that was a very different culture to the one that I wanted. And the first 3 years of Watercare as CEO was all around changing that culture, around safety, being customer-centric, being more commercial, the behaviors of the organization, the individuals, stopping the paternalistic behaviors in the organization, telling people it was okay to make mistakes, and being open, not be frightened to speak up, all those things. The second 3 years was all about taking Watercare beyond what it had been doing, almost taking it global. We were not going to do work outside of New Zealand or Auckland.
Watercare, yeah.
But it was about the presence of Watercare among the water industry global leaders. So it became one of the global leading utilities,
Yeah,
and recognized as a leading utilities of the world. I became part of one of the global leaders, water leaders. And we ended up acquiring businesses. We bought Lutra, which is a small consulting company. We ended up signing a contract to manage Waikato District Council's 3 waters.
yeah,
So these were things that were taking Watercare beyond Auckland.
yeah.
Yeah, exciting stuff, and doing a strategic transformation program, changing the IT, changing the business. That was opening up. That was the next phase. Yeah.
That sounds really exciting. Yeah, it must have been a real fun time.
It was.
In Watercare. Congratulations on your recent appointment as the board of AT.
Yep.
Yeah. What positive change do you want to influence in your current position within AT?
As a director of AT,
Yes.
I think Auckland Transport, firstly, needs to gain trust of Aucklanders.
Yeah.
Okay. So its reputation isn't where it should be. It's quite low. It needs to. So I would say, as a director, first, one of the things I would like to do is get Auckland Transport's reputation where it needs to be.
Yep.
One that is trusted by Auckland Council as its shareholders, and by the people of Auckland who rely and need public transport and the roading network.
Why do you think that is?
Sorry, what?
Why do you think AT does not have the trust of the people?
Well, I think, firstly, any monopoly organization, and I used to be at Watercare, but if you are in a monopoly organization, your customers, the stakeholders, the people that you are serving have no choice.
Yeah.
And when they have no choice, the expectation is that you need to be better than what you would need to be if you were in a competitive environment. Because then the customer has choice. If you're not happy with Auckland Transport, you can go to company B or company C.
Yeah.
But if Auckland Transport is the only organization, then you expect it to be very good. That's the first thing.
It's the expectation.
Yeah, it's the expectation. Secondly, if you're an organization that generally provides very reliable services, whether it's water service, telecommunication services, bus services, train services, the people then get used to that high reliability.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start failing in that reliability, again, you lose their trust.
Yeah.
So if you come from the third world, where you're lucky to get 2 hours of water supply, if you get a whole day of water supply, you're really happy, right?
Yeah.
But if you're in a country where you're getting water supply all the time, 24/7, and then it's off for half an hour, you're really pissed off, right?
100%.
Yeah?
Like, no, I come from a third world country as
Yeah,
well. So
yeah.
I come from India originally.
Yeah.
So I understand that. Yeah.
So I think those two things play
Yeah.
into it. But then I think Auckland Transport, from my point of view,
Yeah.
failed to connect with its people.
Interesting.
So as an organization, and when I was at Watercare, that's one of the things you got to do. You can't be seen to be arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm a firm believer in organizational structure where those entities that are providing services should not have regulatory powers, because organizations that provide service but also have regulatory powers become arrogant.
Yep.
So if you're just a service organization, you can create a culture of providing service.
And
You're
great
subservient.
service.
You're
Yep.
subservient.
Yeah.
I used to remind people at Watercare that our name was Watercare Services Limited. We're providing services.
WSL.
Yeah, so Auckland Transport is also providing services.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I would like to do is improve the trust, improve the passenger services, the customer service that we provide to our customers. So all the cancellations and things that are happening, whether it was because of COVID, because of driver shortages or whatever. And then, the quality of the roads, potholes.
For a first world country, it's not too bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that bad. But again, it's all relative.
Yeah.
And then I think there's this perception of whether the money is being well spent.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's ratepayers and taxpayers' money that is being spent. Is the money being spent wisely?
Yeah.
And I think that when we see lots of cones everywhere and no one working, and the perception is, well, this is not an organization that is spending our money, the public's money, well. Internally, I'm sure as a director, I will find there are passionate, dedicated individuals who are doing their best to provide the services for Auckland.
Yeah.
There's a disconnect, and I think it's a cultural one. So we would...
And you think the budget cuts have nothing to do with it?
I think budget cuts will always have something to do with it.
Yeah.
But I'm also a firm believer that as we do at home, if we're at home and we have our needs and we have our income, you have to cut your cloth to suit, right?
Yeah.
We can't be individuals or organizations that expect whatever money we need to be coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
We're not the CRL, right? It's going to cost what it's going to cost, right? Because the government and Auckland Council is going to find the money.
Yeah.
That's not who we are.
Yeah.
So when there are budget cuts, we need to learn how to become more efficient, more effective. Are we spending the money in the right places, and are we spending it wisely? So I think that would be the other challenge, that funding is going to be a constraint.
And yeah, it's going to become
It's already
worse.
a constraint, yeah. Then we have cost of living crisis. We can't keep asking the people of Auckland to just pay more in rates because they're saying, we're paying, how are you spending my dollar?
Yeah.
Demonstrate that you're spending my money wisely.
Yeah. So let's say if you take countries like England and Singapore, they've
Yeah.
got really, really, really efficient public transportation systems.
Yeah,
Amazing systems, right?
yeah,
I know it's always on the minute that it's on the board. The train will be there, the bus will be there.
yeah.
Yeah. What can we learn from them to bring to New Zealand?
Well, firstly, we should look at other organizations in other countries to say they're doing things, and we should, what can we learn from them?
Yeah.
Rather than try and do everything ourselves.
Yeah,
you know.
100%. We don't need to recreate the wheel.
We don't have to recreate. And I
Yeah.
think there is a little bit of this, we want to do things that are bespoke in New Zealand. We want to be innovative. We have this number 8 wire culture.
Yeah.
But the reality is others are doing well around the world, and we should learn from them. I think the advantage Singapore has a very small footprint.
Agreed.
So does
geographically,
London.
it's not big.
Yeah. And they've got scale in terms of people.
Yeah.
So they could invest.
Mm-hmm.
The geography helps as well.
Yeah. Agreed.
Auckland
They don't
is
have
very
volcanic
narrow.
soil.
Yeah.
They don't have volcanic soil. They don't have rock.
They don't have rock. It's not all scoria. So they
Yeah.
have gone down. They've gone deep. Right?
Yeah.
Singapore, most of the things they're doing is underground because the above ground is premium.
Yeah.
They don't allow car parking on the streets.
Yeah.
Right? Why would you do that? That's premium space.
Yeah.
So I would say that there's a lot for us to learn. But look, I live in Mission Bay, so I used to take the train from Aoraki to get into the city. It was usually on time. I love it, 8 minutes.
Yeah.
But then they started doing work on where you park.
Yeah.
So you couldn't park,
Yeah.
so I couldn't take the train.
Right.
And now, of course, the trains are not working because Kiwi Rail's working on the tracks.
Yeah.
All of those things destroy the confidence the public have in public transport.
Yeah.
So they are buses that run instead, right? But as a user, I've started driving into the CBD. I don't like driving into the CBD, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing, right? So if what we do with our public transport system, if we remove the convenience or the reliability and we shift people back into their cars, then it is very difficult to get them back onto
It
public
really
transport.
is. But if you think about it, the number of cars per household
Yeah.
in New Zealand, there are more cars than people in households
Yeah.
in the whole of New Zealand, and that's a proven fact. So how are you going to change that? How do we as a community change that?
I think it will change slowly. I mean, we have 2 cars, my wife and I.
Yeah, we have
But-
2
but-
cars too.
But
Yeah.
I don't need 2 cars now.
You don't?
No.
Because you live in Mission
I
Bay?
always drive my wife's car. So we don't need 2 cars. So we just have to make a decision at some point, you know. I think most people have cars because of convenience.
Yeah.
And the you know, in Auckland, people are living in one suburb, working in another suburb. Their spouses are working or partners are working in another suburb.
Yeah.
Children are going to school somewhere else. It's all over the place. It hasn't sort of come to an equilibrium where you say, I'm living in the suburb where I'm working and my children are going to school there. Some of them are lucky to do that, you know. That would be great, where your children can walk to school because they're so close. They don't have to be dropped. So there's so many other factors. Parents are dropping their kids to school rather than kids walking to school.
Yeah.
Which is creating traffic problems, but also I think the children are not getting the benefits of walking to school, which is what I did. You know,
Yeah.
we used to walk for 2 kilometers to go to school. The weather doesn't help if it's too wet, too cold.
Yeah.
But going back to your question, reliability of public transport, well, that's exactly where we want to be.
And also availability, isn't it? Reliability is one thing.
Yeah,
Because I live in Hobsonville.
yeah,
I'll tell you what, we have no public transport.
yeah.
None. The closest bus station to me would be, I don't know, at least 2 kilometers away
Okay.
from where we live, Scott Point. That's just an example, right?
Yes, yes.
So it's availability of that as well. So where can I access public transport closest to me?
yeah,
So I'm like, I mean, even given that choice, why would I uptake that when I can just drive my car? So this thought process is running in my head. So I've got to wait, catch a bus to somewhere else. By the time I get there, it's
yeah.
I've wasted so much time.
Exactly.
Like I just said on that TikTok you saw earlier as well. Time is more expensive than money to me.
Yes, yes.
You know, I mean, I could lose all the money in the world and make it
Yeah.
back, no problem. You know,
You
Could
can't
lose
get
it.
your time back.
Nah, it's gone forever.
Exactly. That
Yeah.
is true. That is true.
Yeah.
So we have to take into account people's value of time.
Yeah,
I mean, when I was a student, I used to take the bus all the time, right?
yeah.
And what I like about taking public transport, it gives me the time to reflect. I mean, some people are busy with their phones and doing other things. I just like time to reflect, you know? And
Yeah.
so you're sitting there, you can see other people's behaviors, and you can see, you begin to notice things that you don't otherwise notice.
Fair.
you know?
Yeah, because when you're driving, you're focused on the road.
Yeah, because when you're driving, so I mean, not everyone's like me, but I like the time to reflect. But convenience is important.
Absolutely, yeah.
And where time, so I would be concerned where people from lower socioeconomic groups who end up having lots of vehicles because they all have to go drive different places to earn their living. If they can get on public transport and it's affordable for them to get to their work, that will start addressing some of the equity issues we've got.
Yeah.
It's a complex challenge.
100%, it's not a simple
Yeah,
challenge.
yeah.
But yeah, and one that I have every confidence that you will attempt to solve in your time as director of AT
with others.
with others,
I
of
can
course.
never do it alone.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a team
Yeah.
of people. Absolutely. Three Waters is poised to bring significant change to the water industry.
Yep.
As the ex-CEO of Watercare, what challenges do you see in benefits or downsides you see to three water reforms being introduced to New Zealand?
Well, I think we needed reforms to public water supply. Three Waters, and I haven't been involved with the Three Waters at all. Right? Yeah. So I just have to say that because I think I talk about some of the concerns I have first.
Yeah.
I think Three Waters is a nice phrase to use. You know, it's sort of has this connotation that somehow it's a cyclic thing. You know, it's a cycle. Well, it's not. I mean, there are many waters. You know, in fact, Auckland Council was doing its policy a few years ago, and it had 8 waters in it.
Right. Actually, before we go any further, can we give the viewers an understanding of what Three Waters is?
Exactly. So Three Waters is the drinking water.
Yep.
Okay. The sewage, wastewater, that's the bit that you flush, the grey water, black water. And the third water is the storm water. That's the rainwater that comes down. So this is all going to be put into one entity. And I personally believe that from a service provision point of view, water supply and wastewater services, they are services that you can package up and say, I'm providing you a service. Stormwater is not a service.
It's
right? Stormwater, firstly, you can't package it up.
Yeah.
You know, so when you look at trying to put the functions into like a company or a service organization, water supply is packaged, it's treated, it's put into a pipe, it's pumped or by gravity delivered to your home.
Yeah.
You know, it's the most efficient transport system.
Yep.
Right? Available when you want it. You open it, it's there. Similarly, with wastewater, you know, you flush your toilet, you've got a sink, it's packaged, it goes into a pipe, gets pumped to a treatment plant.
Yeah.
Occasionally, both water and wastewater get out of the pipes, and it's our job to make sure it doesn't. Because if water gets out of the pipe, we are wasting it. If sewage gets out of the pipe, then you're polluting the environment. Stormwater cannot be packaged.
Interesting.
It's natural.
Yep.
It's going to rain. It's going to flood people. You can't put it, you can't constrain it. Right? So it is not a service in that respect. So by putting it together into an entity, you're taking away what I believe is a function that local government provides. Right. So local government provides planning and land use controls.
Yep.
So stormwater is very heavily tied up with land use. So if you and I are neighbors and it's raining, right, and you are above my property, then water from your property is going to flow onto my property.
Naturally,
right? It can be an inconvenience to me, and then you and I could have an issue. We can go to the council, and it's a council function. Try taking that to a company. So I turn it around. Let's assume one of these 3 water entities was already existing today.
Yep.
And we had all this flooding that we've just had. Muruwai, you know. What is their responsibility?
Councils.
Which bits are council's responsibility?
Yeah.
And which bits would be the water entity's responsibility? Where would you draw the line?
That's an interesting question.
Right?
Yeah.
And I know the legislation is going through, the bill is there, and I've been looking through it. It hasn't really been defined. Right? The only thing that's common, because when I was at Metro Water's responsibility, this is the old Auckland Council's water company.
Yeah.
It looked after water supply and wastewater.
Yeah.
And on contract, it managed stormwater for Auckland City Council.
Right.
Similarly, when Manukau Water Limited was set up, it looked after water supply and wastewater, and on contract, it looked after stormwater for Manukau City. And the stormwater that it looked after was stormwater that was in pipes.
Yeah.
Because stormwater is not always in pipes,
No, it's not. Yeah.
right? Stormwater flows wherever it wants to.
It's water.
It flows in your backyard.
Yeah.
It flows in gullies. It flows, and we've got
Overflow sums.
yeah.
Yeah. Wherever.
So
Yeah. On the road.
on
side of the
roads
road.
we got
Yeah.
sums, so we got transport involved, and most of the water comes out of roading surfaces.
Yeah.
And in Auckland we've got groundwater.
Mm-hmm.
So Ellerslie, Mount Eden, the other suburbs, they do not have a stormwater system.
They don't?
They don't.
Okay.
It
that's interesting.
rains.
Yeah.
The water from the roofs and the roads, they go into the scoria.
Yeah.
They disappear.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I had a house in Ellerslie.
Yeah.
Which my mum and dad then moved into, still own it. The water just goes into the ground.
Wow.
There's no pipes,
Okay.
right? So if it is a service you're providing, what's the infrastructure for
Yeah.
stormwater? So I have lots of questions about that. But then as soon as you put stormwater into the three waters and say you're an entity that will manage water supply, wastewater, and stormwater, that entity has to be given regulatory powers,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And as soon as you give the entity regulatory powers, it's got a service function and it's got a regulatory function. And for me, my thinking, any organization that has both of those is never effective. It struggles with, am I here to regulate or am I here to provide a service?
Yeah.
You know?
So Watercare is predominantly a company that provides service. like you said.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So Watercare has got no regulatory powers.
Yeah.
It's a company like
Yep.
any other company. And I think that has been one of the reasons why Watercare has been very successful, because it knows what its purpose is.
Yeah.
And all the regulations it needs is with Auckland Council, its
Yeah.
shareholder.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the bylaws and everything else is with Auckland Council. And the only challenge Watercare had and still has is the debt constraint that the council has.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons for the whole reform was to separate the balance sheet of the
Right.
water entity, especially Watercare, from Auckland Council, right? Because Auckland Council owns 100% of Watercare. And if more than 50% is owned by a council or any entity, then you've got to consolidate the balance sheet.
Right.
So if Auckland Council owned less than 50%, it wouldn't have to consolidate Watercare's
Balance sheet.
balance sheet.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be, Watercare wouldn't be constrained by Auckland Council's balance sheet. But currently, Watercare is constrained by Auckland Council's balance sheet. Will the Three Waters reform address that issue? I have a big question mark, especially
Okay.
for Auckland. Does it really? I haven't seen it. Because someone has to guarantee that.
Yeah.
And if it's not the shareholder, is it the government?
Okay. So that's an example of Auckland. What
Yeah.
about the rest of New Zealand?
I think the rest of New Zealand, in terms of, so I think the rest of New Zealand, they need the reform as well.
They
'Cause
need the reform?
they don't have scale.
Yeah.
Some of the councils are doing very well.
Yeah.
Okay, some aren't.
Yeah.
They're struggling because of lack of funding. So if we can address the funding issue,
Mm-hmm.
you know, then all of you can have any model.
Mm.
If the model
100%.
allows the entity to have the funding that it needs, then they can perform. So the Three Waters, in my view, still has this concern. I have the concern about stormwater being in it. I think it should just be water supply and wastewater. And I think that, yeah, there are too many entities. It needs to be consolidated. They need to be focused on providing water and wastewater services.
So in summary, what we're saying is, yep, it's a great concept,
Yep.
but you can't give an entity service power and regulatory power or functions to perform at the same time.
Yeah, I
Which is
think,
a-
you know, if I looked at the Three Waters reform process,
Yeah.
firstly, I think it's too long.
It's too long.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
taken too long.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Whenever
just
you-
like everything in New Zealand.
Yeah,
right?
when you restructure something, and I've restructured organizations, it's like a surgery.
Yeah.
It's very disruptive.
Yep.
People get affected. So surgery needs to be very quick.
Yep. Get in.
Do it
get out.
quickly, recovery can be long. You
Yeah.
know, the planning can be long, but the surgery has to be very quick. Three
Interesting.
Waters has been too long. It's painful. We are losing people from the water industry.
Yeah.
People from Watercare have left. I know so many people who've left, which is not good for the water industry. So I would say that the reform should have gone back to why are we doing this? I'm an engineer. I like solving problems. To solve the problem, you need to really define the why.
Yeah.
What is the problem? What are we trying to solve? So separating the
That's a
balance
good point,
sheet.
though. What are we trying to solve with the reform, with the three waters? What are we trying to solve?
Well, I think the first thing was for Auckland,
Yeah.
separating the balance sheet.
Okay. Separating the balance sheet. That's a key
You
issue.
separate the balance sheet for Auckland, but if in separating the balance sheet you provide the same model or similar model for rest of New Zealand, then they should have the balance sheet to be able to do the work that they need to do, which is to invest in water and wastewater infrastructure, that they haven't been able to do because they've been part of the councils.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, well, they need to do what needs to be done. You need a regulator. You need a water quality regulator, which we've got.
Yep.
Unlike the old Ministry of Health, which was the regulator but had no teeth. So you
Right.
need a regulator that has teeth. There are consequences. So we need consequences. So if you do not do what you're supposed to do, you're going to get some consequences. You're going to get fined. You're going to get, something will happen.
Yeah.
So we need separation of balance sheet. We need a regulator.
Yep.
And then I would have said, you just leave the councils and say, the regulator is going to start waving the stick in 3 years' time.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 3 years to sort yourself out. Do whatever you want to do. That's sort of what they did in the UK.
Yeah.
They didn't prescribe.
Yeah.
They said, so in UK, if you look at the water companies, they're all different models.
Yeah,
They're
right.
cooperatives, So defining what they should be, defining how many they should be, that's one way of doing it. Leaving it to the council so that they can choose, give the locals the choice. But they know that they have to change because there's a regulator now, and they've been enabled by being given a model for separating the balance sheet.
Right. So they've been shown what good looks like.
Yeah.
Go get it. You've got 3 years.
Go
and
get it.
Here's the money to sort it out.
Yeah.
Solve the problem.
Yeah.
Interesting perspective. Yeah. Raveen, with your extensive experience with Watercare and such organizations like now recently AT, climate change is now a very important topic for discussion, and the effects of climate change on our environment, most recently the massive flooding, so on and so forth. So what are your views on climate change and how is it affecting our environment?
Very good question. Now, being someone from the water industry, so water is the currency for climate change.
Right.
Climate change manifests itself through water.
Mm-hmm.
More rain, less rain, sea level rise, flooding, droughts. So it has been a subject of interest when I was at Watercare, but I think it's a subject of interest for all of us because it's going to impact us all, and we don't really know how.
Or we don't have control of it either.
And we definitely don't have. We can't fight nature.
No.
And we don't know how rapid it's going to be. What we do know is that it's a major challenge, and it's going to create challenges from an infrastructure point of view. And as you just mentioned, we've got all this flooding. We've got communities that are currently located, homes and businesses and infrastructure in areas that are going to be subject to inundation more often, more frequently, probably subject to sea level rise in the future. Big decisions as to what should we do. Should we retreat or should we build infrastructure to cope with rising sea level or whatever? And if we retreat, who pays? Is it a private good? So private individuals need to pay for it all? Or is it a local council? Is it central government? Or is it a combination of private individuals, councils, government? Is there a role for insurance? I don't have the answer, but I think there's a big question, and that question is being posed right now because of what's happened and continues to happen this year. There's been so much rain this year that it's going to challenge a lot of councils and government. And we've got infrastructure that is getting damaged and hammered.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talk about resilience.
Yeah, right.
A lot of talk about resilience. And this is an interesting subject for me because when we had the drought in 2020 and 2021, there was all this talk about resilience. And it's like, well, most people don't know what it means, especially from an infrastructure point of view. Personally, I'm a big fan of the notion that infrastructure will only provide a certain degree of resilience because we are dealing with nature.
Yep. and water flows wherever it wants to. So,
Exactly. And we cannot control it.
I mean,
And
to a certain degree we can, but
no, yeah, to a certain degree.
yeah.
But you know that, okay, if you say, okay, we're going to build culverts
Yep.
for 1 in 10 years
Yeah.
storms, and then suddenly they get washed away and we say, oh, well, the frequency is going to be more often, and what is a 1 in 10 year could be more like a 1 in 50 year, 1 in 100 year storm,
Yeah.
which means the probability of it happening increases.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing I found watching the news. I think so many people are confused. They think a 1 in 100 year storm means it will only happen every 100 years.
Not necessarily.
Well, that's not what it means.
Yeah.
It means that there's a chance of it happening 1 in 100, which is 1%,
Yeah.
right? But it could happen today, and it could happen next week, and it could happen again next year, you know.
Yeah, we've had 2 cyclones this year. So it's
Exactly.
crazy.
So I think, you know, this concept that I bought the house and
Yeah.
I thought it was only going to happen in 100 years' time. Well, no, I'm sorry. It could happen tomorrow, and did happen. Okay. But the resilience that I think we need to focus on is human resilience,
Okay.
community resilience. And if you look at how we coped, it's because of the community resilience. The resilience, infrastructure resilience, you can only provide so much. But community resilience is something we need to work on. So
What do you mean by community resilience?
so community resilience is individual resilience.
Yeah.
So when shit happens,
Yeah.
whatever it may be, earthquakes, storms, droughts, how do I cope individually with this uncertainty, right? And then how do I cope as a family, and how do I cope as a neighborhood? And when everything is destroyed, flooded, what do we do? Who responds? And you can see great community resilience in Hawke's Bay. You know,
Yeah.
you can see them coming through iwi, through Maori groups, and you saw that in White Island when we had the White Island explosion.
Yeah.
The local iwi, how they got involved.
But that's such a New Zealand thing, though, isn't
It's
it?
it is a New Zealand thing, but I
Yeah.
think it's
It's one of the reasons I stayed here, by the way.
yeah.
In New Zealand, I stayed back. It's for the people.
Exactly.
I didn't stay back because I could make $1 million here. I stayed back because I found that in general, New Zealanders are pretty chill, and it matters to them that you take care of one another.
And we will have to take care of one another even more because of this. And the one another is beyond New Zealand now. So we have to look after our Pacific Island neighbors, right? Because they're going to be affected. And we are their closest. I mean, I'm from Fiji. I'm a Pacific Islander, right?
Yeah.
So climate change has got infrastructure challenges.
Yeah.
It's got mental well-being challenges, you know,
100%.
because we lose loved ones, we lose our belongings, we lose our livelihoods, we lose our legacies, people's photographs, you know, whatever it may be. They get washed away and suddenly it's gone, right? Memories are only left. So that's why you need the resilience. So we need to have the resilience of coping when this happens, and how quickly and this is the big issue, I think, you know, if you talk to the people who've been adversely affected, the biggest issue is this uncertainty. Why is it taking so long? They can understand why it takes so long to rebuild a road or a bridge, but why does it take so long to understand that my life has been destroyed, our livelihood has been destroyed, and I need help, and how quickly are we going to find? So because it's happened for almost the first time, everyone is struggling to answer the question, central government, local government. But I'm hoping that we will have some responses that can be standardized and used and refined and improved going forward.
But if anything, COVID should have trained us to pull as a community together, work towards a common goal, shouldn't it?
No, I think, well, I mean, we'll have different views. My own view is COVID isolated us.
Fair. I agree with that. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I'll give you the example. At Watercare,
Yeah.
we were just going through this phase of doing things in teams, having scrums, and, they have this concept where you bring all the brains together, solve problems quickly, right? And then suddenly COVID happened, and it was like, no, everyone go home and work from home and work in teams,
Yeah.
which is it's an oxymoron,
Yeah.
You're working on Teams, which is Microsoft Teams, but individually, well, that's not a team, Firstly, you don't get behaviors and the cultural aspects. I can't look you in the eye, I can't see your body language and all of that. So suddenly we were working, and most people start doing other things, They can put the camera off and, I don't know, do something else while they're in a team meeting and play games or whatever. So I think, COVID for me isolated people rather than brought them together. It did not bring people together. These climatic conditions we are having, this is bringing people together. This is bringing people in different ways. Communities that are next to each other who are being adversely affected, but communities that haven't been affected, who are watching others who have been adversely affected, are also saying, well, this is not good.
What can we do to support?
What can we do to support it, right?
Yeah.
Because this is not an individual problem. This is where, how governments respond, how councils respond, sends a signal to the rest of the community as to what their level of trust and confidence in their council and their government is.
Someone like you who's had key strategic positions in key organizations, it's intriguing to know that you're a big fan of a game called Total War.
Yes. How did you find that out? You read it somewhere.
Research?
Oh, wow. Okay. You never know what you find, eh? Yes.
Yeah, you never know what you find.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an avid gamer as well. So I want to ask you, why Total War? And how has that kind of helped you in your strategic life? Running massive organizations.
Yeah, good question. So I have to tell you this. I can only play Total War when my wife's having a shower.
Mate.
Yeah, because
please tell me she has an hour shower.
Well, she has long showers and gets changed. No, I'm kidding. But because I have to spend more time with her, right? But no, it comes out of, I love playing chess.
Yep, me too.
Right?
Yeah.
So I don't have anyone to play chess with.
Ah, damn.
My wife doesn't play chess.
Right.
My kids are all gone. It's a strategy game, right?
Yeah, Total War strategy game. Yeah.
And in Hindi they say Satranj. That's the name. That's a chess game is called Satranj.
Right. Okay.
Which sounds like strategy. So Total War is a strategy game.
Yeah.
It's online, but I don't play online.
Right.
I just play against the computer.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't play against other players. I'm not inclined. So I don't play anything with others online. I don't even know whether it's safe to do that. So I don't do things online.
Come on.
I'm old-fashioned. Yeah. But so I play Total War because it is like playing chess, but on multiple levels.
Yeah.
So it's a strategy game, turn-based. So I make my moves. Computer makes its move, then I make my move. And it's all about, well, it's around war. So I don't know how much you know about Total War, but they've got different modules. So it started off with a Japanese, it was called Total War Shogun.
Yeah.
And then they have Total War Napoleon, Total War Medieval, Total War.
There's Rome, a Roman civilization.
Rome, Attila, and, So I've got about 6 or 7 of those, But basically, what it teaches me, it's got a lot of management lessons in it.
Yeah.
So when you play Total War, the first thing you realize, because you're building civilizations, you're running a civilization, and then you've got your neighbors. It's like running a country, right?
Yep. or running Auckland Transport or
Yeah,
Watercare.
yeah.
That's
So,
strict,
so,
huh?
so you have so much resources, so much money, and you got to
Yeah.
decide: do you put it into amenities, civic buildings, or into military?
Yep.
Right. That's the first challenge. How much do you put? If you don't put it into military, you are at risk of getting invaded by your neighbors.
Yeah.
If you don't put it into civic and your infrastructure is not there, you get a revolution. Your people are not happy, so you've got to keep them happy. And then it's all about how do you create relationships, diplomatic relationships with your neighbors. But they're not all going to be nice people. And in real life, they're not.
Yeah.
Right? So you can be nice, but they're not going to be nice. So how are you going, you need a little bit of mongrel, So you can be a nice person, but when you are a leader, when you're a manager, you need to be able to bite.
Yep.
Right? And if you are all bark and no bite, you don't survive, right? So there's lots of things about how do you keep your, so if I turn it into management,
Yeah.
you got to keep your staff happy,
Mm-hmm.
right? You got to keep your customers happy.
Your stakeholders happy.
You got to stakeholders happy. You got to build alliances because you can't do it alone, And innovation in Total War, your innovation can be shared. So if you've got something and your neighbors or some other civilization has got it, you can trade your innovation. You will progress faster if you collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
You will not get anywhere if you don't collaborate.
Yep.
So there's an element of collaboration, but you've got to be smart at what you're doing because whoever you are dealing with is also smart.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if I'm the client and I'm dealing with you as a contractor, well, the contractor's not stupid,
Yeah.
okay? And you can't rely on everyone being nice.
Oh, yeah.
So you've
Everybody is what's in it for me.
exactly. So
Yeah.
you've got to be commercially astute.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be commercially naive, right? So, but you can negotiate. So
Mhm.
you talked about the Fast 50, Waikato
Waikato 50?
50.
Yeah.
So that was like, okay, when I was at Watercare, we needed to upgrade. We didn't need to, but politically they said, oh, well, Watercare hasn't invested in infrastructure, which was not true.
Yeah.
Okay, well, do you want us to invest? We can do it. It's a drought. Do you want us to invest? Let's do it. But it's like I brought the chief executive of Fletcher's, Peter Reedy, the head of Becker, Greg Lowe. We sat down with Steve Webster from Watercare,
Yep.
and we said, we want to build this at Waikato. We want it built in 12 months, and we think it should cost only this much, and we're going to do it together.
Yep.
The purpose is to get it done in 12 months.
And we did.
And it got done.
Yep. And
Right?
to date, I'll tell you, that's the only project I ever worked on
Yeah.
that we finished on time, under budget, and built a water treatment plant that would deliver 50 million litres of water to Auckland a day,
Yeah.
additional to its additional capacity, in 12 months.
In 12 months.
Amazing.
And 50 million litres a day is a lot of water.
It's crazy amount of water.
Yeah. It serves a city,
Yeah.
right? So
Because
you
what its
can-
previous capacity, 100 million, and we added
Yep.
another 50 million to it,
50,
didn't we?
yeah. So if you bring the parties together, if you have a common purpose. So in military, in war,
Yeah.
when you go to war with someone, you have alliances and you say, that's the enemy.
Yeah.
Will you come with me and we're going to fight that enemy? And so people come together and go and fight the enemy.
Yeah.
The difference here is we don't have enemies. We have projects. We have
purpose.
challenges.
Yeah.
So
Common goals.
Common goals. So the purpose is, in that case, we need to build a water treatment plant. Can you come and help us? And we're going to work together. We're going to be one team. And all that matters is that objective.
Yep. And I was part of that project, and I'm
Yep.
testament to saying we did work as one team. I worked out of the Becker's office. The Fletcher team was sitting in the Becker office
Yep.
through the design phase, and then the entire team moved onto site when we started construction.
Yep.
There was no paper war. I
Yep.
raise RFI, send it to you. You don't answer it. That gets lost in a pile. None of that. None of that.
Yeah.
You know, we have a problem. I'll walk up to your desk, talk to you.
You imagine how many of New Zealand's challenges can be solved if we did that.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, we get so caught up in process, we get so caught up with the adversarial aspects that nothing gets done.
Yeah.
Or they take too long, they become too expensive. Yeah.
So are those learnings from Total War for you?
Well, I think they're learnings from everywhere, but Total War.
Yeah.
So I play Total War because it's my relaxation,
Fair enough.
right?
Yeah. You need to wind down.
When I'm really need to get something out,
Yeah.
well, I can go and do it on the computer, right? I don't hurt anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I can go and bombard the neighboring country or something, and you know, and then
What do you do? You'd be like, you tell the missus, "Hey, darling, it's time for a shower, so I can play Total
Nah.
War because I'm pissed
no,
off."
I say you can go watch your favorite television program, you know.
you said you only play Total War when she's in the showers.
Well, that was a long time ago, but now
fair
you know you can stream anything,
Yeah, fair
so
enough.
you know you can go and watch. She can watch her. She loves watching tennis, and
yeah,
there's
fair
always
enough.
a tennis somewhere in the
Yeah.
world. So yeah,
That's interesting. I do have one more question for you before we wrap up.
sure.
Yeah. So I've always wondered, as CEOs of different organizations, which you've been part of, and I've observed other CEs and execs. It's a brutal question. Yep.
Yeah.
Choose not to answer it.
No, I can answer it.
Does it get lonely on the top?
Yeah, a CEO role is very lonely.
Yep.
Because you have to. We're human beings.
I
We're just like
fully
everyone
agree. I
else,
fully
right?
agree. The amount of shit you guys take is ridiculous.
Yeah. So the
It's
first,
like you get bombarded from every different angle. Because I've seen Peter Reedy, who's Fletcher CE, and
Yep.
I've kind of worked on the same floor as he did and observed a little bit of what he goes through.
Yep.
And I've been part of other organizations where I've seen the general managers and CEs and the amount they take in, just
Yep.
hitting them from different directions. Your mind frame's just switching from one to the next. How do you deal with it?
Yeah. So the first thing is you grow a thick skin. So that's something Mark Ford told me a long time ago. Grow a thick skin because your ego, your emotions get affected when someone says something, and it's like, well, it doesn't matter. So one thing that I learned, and I still use every day, is I don't care what other people think. And I don't. I care what my wife tells me. I care
100%.
what my children tells me. I care what my friends tell me, the people who are dear to me that I trust. I care about what they say, and I listen to them. I don't care about the others. So in social media and all that, so during the drought, people were writing things about me and, my salary and,
Yeah.
of course, what's your name?
By the way, on the record,
Yeah.
I believe that's nonsense.
Yeah, exactly.
That,
Phil
that,
Goff
that,
and
that never should have come out. Yeah.
I couldn't be bothered, right?
Yeah, who cares?
So the first thing you got to do is not worry about others. You got to stand for who you are.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, because you have to be comfortable in your own skin. To do that, you need to have a lot of confidence, but you also need to be financially stable because you could lose your job, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
And the next thing is that you have to do it for the rest of the people, because so if I'm the CEO, all the staff are vulnerable and they see the constant for them is their leader, and they would like to believe that their leader is like somehow able to solve all their problems.
Or give them clear direction.
Yeah. Whether you can or can't. I do have to tell them, hey, I'm a human being and all that. But if you let's say you are lost, right? And someone is your leader, the role of the leader is to give you comfort and confidence that you'll be okay.
Yep.
We're going to get through this.
Yeah.
Even though he or she may think we're buggered.
Mm.
You can't say that, right? Because you got to keep that hope alive. You got to keep the motivation alive. You got to keep the engagement alive. So that's sort of draining, but at the same time, it gives that energy, right? But then most of the things you can't share with anyone else.
Absolutely. And that's why I asked you if it does
Yeah.
get lonely on the top.
Yeah, because you can't share that, because it's like, well, so, one of the things that I did do, there's a few other CEOs that you have coffee with, you share things with, because their problems are very similar to your
Yep.
problems. And so you can give each other comfort, but you can also learn from one another. it's like everyone else, a CEO also reports to someone, right? Usually the board through the chair. And so a CEO always requires a supportive board, right? And if you don't have a supportive board, then that is a failure. It's the same as if you're working and your supervisor, your manager is not supportive. Well, you know you're not going to be there long.
Yeah,
You
that's a
don't wanna be
shitty
there.
manager.
It's
Quit.
a shitty manager, right?
Yeah, quit.
So that's a shitty board, right?
Yep.
So you got to move, quit, move on. Yeah.
So interesting. Do you have any of the techniques that you use to help manage your mental stress and mental well-being at the top when you've got to deal with all of that stress?
Yeah, so I think, well, it's hard, but a very long time ago, I decided that I was taking too much work home, right? I would work, then I had one of these, what's called a pilot's briefcase. It's one of those big ones, it's wider. You don't see them these days. I used to have one of those because you put your hefty laptop in it because they weren't that slim those days, and a lot of files and things. And I used to take them home, and kids were young, and then I'd be doing work, and then I reflected on it. Why am I doing all this, right? So I stopped. I told myself, I'm going to stop taking work home. Well, you can never stop taking it. You take it mentally, right? But I would take my briefcase, take it out of the car, take it into the house, but never open it, right? Never open it. And then slowly I just didn't have a briefcase to take inside. It would stay in the car. So the first thing is switch off. It's hard. But I remember I was working in Church Road in Onehunga, driving home. I would stop and just go and sit on a park bench for about 10 minutes. Because I knew I'd get home, my kids would be there, my wife would have picked them up. She would be stressed with the kids. They'd be running around, making noise and all this. I'll be going in there all stressed from my day's work. My wife's expectation would be that I would somehow come home fresh, which I wouldn't be. So if I sat down on the park bench or even in the car if it was raining, just disconnected from work and looked forward to going home and spending time with the kids and just get into that other mode, away from the work mode. Because what happens, and I think it happens to most people, is you go home and you still take the work. You take the frustration, you take that anger or whatever it is, and then it comes out. And if the wife is also working, and then boom, you know.
That's when collisions happen. So,
so
you reckon that 10 minutes has really added value and changed?
Yeah, so that's the reflection time. So I found that reflection is very important for me. So I reflect all the time. So even when I was a CEO at Watercare, I'd be sitting in my chair during the day, and I would just look out the window and look at the sky. But I wouldn't be looking at the sky. I'd be thinking about the things, the decisions I made. Some of the decisions have to be made because they have to be made. And then whether I should make another decision now because that decision probably was the wrong one, or did I hurt someone in the way that I made the decision because I wasn't as caring at that point in time, and all
you've got a lot running on up there while you're dealing with the problem.
So you got to have time to reflect. And then it's something I used to tell my execs and everyone: have free time. If you're just working, you're not that effective.
You just
go make yourself a cup of tea and have a chat with someone. And so it's quite counter to some of the managers before, where if you're not at your desk and if you're not working, you're not productive. Well, that's not true.
No,
you
not
could
true
be
at
at
all.
your desk, but you're not as productive as you would be if your mind is clear and you're energized and you're motivated. And to do that, if you have to sit down with someone and talk about how rugby was over the weekend to get all excited, or how Total War was, you go back and you're more energized.
Absolutely,
You get more out of it.
You could deliver more in less time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, Raveen, thank you so much for your time, your valuable insights. It was very enlightening.
No, thank you for the opportunity.
Mate,
Andy.
it's an
It's been
absolute
great.
pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.